All right, hello. I'm Kevin Gilson. I am the leader, the manager of a visualization group at a company called WSP. We're an infrastructure consulting firm. I'm going to talk today about a project we embarked on almost, I think it was in 2018, as a partnership with the company Autodesk and the city of Paris. The city was looking at redeveloping the sites around several of their landmarks that had been in disrepair and were lacking any security amenities. And so they instituted several design competitions with competing teams to submit proposals to redevelop these sites. So we worked with Autodesk to propose to the city that they use an interactive modeling approach to do this. The city wanted some kind of objective way of evaluating the different designs, something that would be fair and equally represent the multiple design submittals. Typical architectural submittals can be very illustrative and very non-objective. The city was also interested in promoting a three-dimensional design-based workflow so that they could end up with an existing conditions model for these sites that they would use for construction and asset management moving forward. So why a VR model? We proposed to the city that it was a great way to compare the designs in a consistent technique and aesthetic. We proposed to build a detailed existing conditions model so that all of the designs could be incorporated into the same context so that representations would be equally shown with the same context. By having a real-time model, viewers could walk around and look at the designs from any place on the site in the model. VR models, as you know, support great different types of output. You can do animations, you can do high-res renderings, and of course, you can run it in a stereoscopic headset, which we've proposed to be a very useful way to create very immersive and realistic views of the model. So the process started with existing conditions capture. The first site we worked on was the Eiffel Tower site. And we had a company Gexpertise scan the site and take photos around the site and develop a very detailed point cloud model that was used as a reference for building the existing conditions model. So this video was developed just as a way of kind of showing some of the results of that process. And it's got some music, but I don't know that the music's critical. Yeah, so they had a camera rig that they drove around the site that captured 360 videos and imagery. They did ground-based scans and a few aerial LiDAR scans and developed this point cloud for the entire site. It was a pretty impressive model to deal with. And one of the reasons we wanted this type of model was we wanted a way to confirm tree heights. It was very important to the city that the trees were represented accurately and that buildings were represented accurately. And there was no real existing as-built information when we started the project. So we then took that scan, we brought it into a modeling application and used the scans as bases for building the existing conditions models, including placing trees, which had to be optimized trees for a real-time model, but they were scaled using the point clouds as a reference. We also used the point clouds to develop structures on the site so that we were sure that those structures were being represented correctly, and those would remain in place for the city to use in an as-built model. So these are just some shots of our team kind of working in the model. We developed several types of 3D models using the data. One was a 3D Studio Max visualization model. We also developed what we called a BIM model. It was in infrastructure, but it allowed CAD data and other types of 3D data to be incorporated into the 3D model. And here you see the trees being brought in. We clipped separate sections of trees, brought them in as point clouds, and used them to place model trees. which were lower poly so that we could run them in a real-time model. We used it to place furniture, and we used the scan of the terrain to create the surface model, which is the base of the site, so that we had the terrain represented accurately. So once we had this 3D model built in a design environment, we then started optimizing it and converting it to Unreal. And we did several walkthroughs that were sort of meant to be an existing conditions tour of the key parts of the site that the city was interested in representing as part of this design competition. So they gave us an idea of how they wanted to walk through the site, and we developed a video with that walkthrough, but then we also had the model running in Unreal as a model that could be taken out to the public as well as provided to the design teams as a tool for developing their designs. I'm showing this. Once we finished the Eiffel Tower site, the city was very pleased with the results, so they embarked on doing the Notre Dame site as well. We didn't have the same kind of existing conditions data because this was done during the reconstruction after the fire. So the site was pretty well blocked and covered up. But we had access to a lot of CAD data, and we were able to scan some of the periphery, the buildings around the site. And again, as part of the deliverable to the design teams, we developed these tours, these walkthroughs of the existing conditions to show them what the site would look like. So then what we developed for each of the teams, we developed a program on how to help them design 3D models for the site that were going to be provided back to us. So we had a 3D design document that was provided that kind of gave them guidelines on what we could use in our model and how we could develop this VR model to show the judging team for the city what the designs would look like. And each of the teams, once we had their three-dimensional elements in the model, they were asked to design a tour, just like the existing tour that we started with, so that each team would have the same amount of time to create a video which represents their design that was shown to the city and allowed people to kind of walk through the project in a similar fashion. Several vantage points in the models were required by the city, so they had to kind of create this tour based upon certain viewpoints that the city wanted to see. So this was an example of one of the walkthroughs for the Eiffel Tower site. This is the Autodesk WSP team. I didn't put the names in anywhere else. It wasn't just me. So this, for instance, showed some of the sites. Each of the tours started with that view through Trocadero down through to the Eiffel Tower. This is a way you come in on the Metro. And then you see that we've highlighted a couple of elements that the team is adding in. They were allowed to add annotation and other types of details to the video, which highlighted their design elements. And so their competition submittal included not only their renderings and drawings and other types of information, but it included these videos that walked through their project and a VR model that included their elements in the context of the site. So the biggest challenge was, these sites are always full of people and cars. And as you know, in Unreal, it can be very challenging to get that many people to work effectively, but we were able to populate it pretty well throughout the site. They're not the best looking people, but I thought this had music as well. The other challenge was that most of the designs included a lot of new landscaping, and again, floral details are very hard to get to look realistic in VR. And that was probably the one point that we spent the most time trying to get as correct as possible. So then once the design team that was selected, one of the teams was selected as the winner, the city hosted these public events where they showed all 4 designs with VR setups, with models, with renderings by the teams, as well as the interactive models and those videos that we showed before. We used it for both the Eiffel Tower site and then eventually for the Notre Dame Cathedral site, which we finished just a couple years ago in advance of the opening. VR was used throughout the process. It was used to show the existing condition. It was used by the design teams to help formulate their designs and to review what visibility was and how scale would affect the view of their objects in the context. The idea of getting the teams to develop the site in 3D wasn't as successful as the city had hoped, but the city ended up with a good detailed existing conditions model once the project was complete. So I think that it was successful in the fact that the city felt the designs were evaluated objectively and in a defensible way. The teams all pushed back on having somebody else render views of their designs, but ultimately the city thought that it was a fair and objective process. So Andrew said, "Oh, are you showing any stereoscopic content?" And Unreal has a pretty cool little plugin that you can put in that NVIDIA produced called Ansel. So you can walk around the model and you just hit an F key and it will spit out some stereo pairs. I did some in color and in black and white. The color always looks a bit funky with, I don't know, the slides. The color always looks a bit funky, so I did them in black and white as well. I think they look a little bit better. And then I just had some fun kind of trying to get a three-dimensional view of the tower. I only saw them on my computer. Do they look 3D out there? Good. All right. Thank you.